One of the most frustrating things is when you're trying to get some work done and your engine will not start. This can be due to a number of reasons, and some of these reasons have some fairly simple fixes. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of those simple fixes. So first, we're going to be talking about fueling. Now this is a common problem that has, I'm sure, happened to a lot of people. You go to start your engine and you haven't started it for a long time. Say it's on a lawnmower or a go-kart and it won't start. Maybe it's cold out. Maybe it's not. It won't start. What is the first thing you want to do to start diagnosing the problem? I found the best and easiest way to start out is by simply spraying some starting fluid in the carburetor. So most engines will have an air filter mounted directly to the front of the carburetor. Like this engine, this carburetor actually does not come with this engine. I just mocked it up for the purpose of this video, but it still works the same. So you'll unbolt your air filter and take it off, and it's also worth noting that this air filter could be clogged, so it's good to clean that out, and that could be a cause of the problem. And you'll see in here, this hole is called the throat of your carburetor, and this is where your air will come in. So if your engine won't start, a good way to check if it is a fueling problem or a spark problem is by spraying a little bit of starting fluid, which the main component of starting fluid is ether usually, and then crank it over like usual, pull the cord, and it should start up for a second, fire up, and then stop again. Or it'll just keep running, and that means that it was just a simple lack of fuel prime. Obviously, your engine is going to naturally have a harder time starting in colder weather because the cylinder's cold, everything's cold, and cold things don't combust as well. So it'll just take longer to start. But if it won't start at all in the cold, that probably means you're getting a lack of fuel, and so helping it out with a little starting fluid can go a long ways. So that's a good place to start. And if it does start up and die down, you know that your spark plug's good, and you feel your electrical system's good because it's able to ignite the fuel. And so by spraying starting fluid, you're bypassing the whole fuel assembly and spraying it directly into the engine. So now that you know your fueling system's bad, what do you do about that? What could it be that's causing fuel to not get to the engine? Now I know this sounds stupid, but check your fuel. Check your gas tank. Is it empty? Because if it is, that's obviously going to cause some problems. And this has happened to me on multiple occasions. I forget to put gas in it, and I'm like, why won't it start? Why is it running terrible? Well, because I didn't put gas in it. So that's the obvious enough answer. And so if that's the case, simply refuel. But if you do have gas, make sure your fuel valve is open. A lot of engines will have this here, which this is just a fuel cutoff switch. So if it's off, obviously fuel is not going to be able to flow through. So you won't get any fuel to your carburetor. So make sure that's on. Now you can see the design on carburetors is different. This is a really small one. I don't remember exactly what it was off, but you can see the fuel shutoff valve is actually right here on the carburetor. So you got fuel, it's flowing to the carburetor. Why won't it start still? So now we need to dive a little deeper into the actual carburetor itself. Alright, so I'm just going to take off this air filter housing. Once we take this off, you can see here's our carburetor. Now I don't have this hooked up to any of the fuel lines, but it will be hooked up to both the fuel lines and your throttle assembly, so you'll need to take that off. And you actually don't need to pull your carburetor off, but you can pull it off all the way. And once you do that, you'll see in the front it has a choke valve lots of times and a throttle valve on this other side. This valve is what regulate your airflow mixture and how much fuel is going into your engine. But what will cause a lot of problems lots of times is what's called the jet. The jet sits in the underside of your carburetor. So take this little bolt out here and you'll be able to pull the bowl off. The bowl holds fuel for your engine in the carburetor. And there's a little float in here which regulates the fuel level in the bowl. And there's a little hole up in here, right where you took this bolt out, right underneath it, there's a little hole, and that's the jet hole. So basically, fuel gets sprayed up through that, or actually sucked up through that due to the Venturi effect, and gets sprayed into your engine. So if that's clogged, obviously you won't get fuel. So there are specialized carburetor cleaning kits that'll have these really thin wires basically that you can poke up into that hole and make sure it's fully clear of any debris, any corrosion that could block it. But if you take a really thin wire that you could find on a bicycle brake cable, usually has really thin wires, and those will fit up in here. Anything like that that you can use to poke in here and potentially clean it out is great. So do that. So now you should be getting good fuel through your jet. So now if you put the carburetor back on and everything back on, and you try to start your engine again, it should fire right up. Now another useful tip for making sure your carburetor is not clogged, if you have an engine that's really been sitting for like a long time, like multiple years, potentially out in the rain or in bad conditions where it could have got really corroded on the inside, it's a good idea to soak your carburetor over a long, like overnight or something, in a solution of carburetor cleaner or something like that, some chemical that can remove corrosion. And then that'll do a lot of the work for you. Spray some compressed air through all of the ports and areas. Spray some brake cleaner in there. That'll help free up any oils and grits that happen to get into your carburetor. And those are all useful tips for cleaning these things out so you'll have the best chance of it running. Let's talk about spark for a minute. So what if it's not a fueling problem? How can you tell? Well, when you do the starting fluid test, by spraying starting fluid into your carburetor and starting the engine, if nothing happens still, you know that you have a spark problem most likely. So that means that your spark plug's not firing for some reason and igniting the fuel. What you want to do is remove the spark plug. Once you've pulled your spark plug out, you can take a brief look at it, and it shouldn't be really black because that means it's burning too rich, and it shouldn't be white because that means it's being burned too lean. But if it looks fairly normal, that's fine. You don't have to worry about this too much until after you've tested to see if this really is the problem. So first, obviously, you'll take your spark plug wire off before you unscrew it, but put it back in the spark plug wire, and then touch it to a metal part on the engine, like the valve cover or the head or something, and then crank it over. So let me see if I can do this here. You can see very clearly that this spark plug has a healthy spark, so that's good. So if this is a spark plug problem, you will not have a spark. And okay, so you don't have a spark, now what? Well, to make sure that it's not your points, which is what actually generates the spark, you can put a screwdriver inside of here, so it's touching the metal part, and then touch it and part of the metal and pull it over, and you should get electrocuted. Well, it does a good job of shocking you. It'll hurt, but it's a good way to test and if you got electricity flowing through this wire or not. Now, if you don't want to do that, all you have to do is simply get this really close to the metal, like here, and crank it over, and you should see an arc between the screwdriver and your metal. So let me see if I can do this. It's kind of tricky. You have to hold it at just the right distance, but it's a good way to tell if you do have electricity flowing through this or not. There we go. You can see that we got a little spark going in between the screwdriver and the valve cover here. So that tells me that the points are good, the coils are good. And that's basically the piece of metal that is rubbing against your flywheel and generating electricity for your spark. So if those are bad, then you got bad points, and you can look into getting some new ones or possibly adjusting them. But if it is a spark plug, if you do get the spark from this method and not with the spark plug in here, that means that you have a bad spark plug. And what you can do with a bad spark plug is you can try to clean it out a little bit. Okay. You can try to sand it out a little bit in between these two electrodes, and you can also try to clean out around here, and that'll hopefully solve the problem. If that doesn't, then you probably just need to get a new spark plug. So look at the number on here, take it to your local hardware store, your local auto parts store, whatever, and pick a new spark plug. They're fairly cheap, and it should be a simple fix, simple installation. Okay. Okay, so for once you've taken that off, you'll have access to your flywheel and, more importantly, your points. So that's what these are here. This has a coiled up wire in here and these metal pieces, so that way when this flywheel spins it around, it has a magnet on it that comes around every rotation, and this coil basically makes electricity from that. And so if these have gone bad, you might need to reposition them, move them down a little bit so they're closer or farther away, or possibly even replace them altogether. Getting an engine up and running can be difficult, but it can also be very simple. All the simple fixes I showed in this video, anyone can do them. They're very simple, and it's great to know. So if your engine won't start, you know just what to do to figure out what the problem is and fix it. It's worth mentioning that I did not list all the problems that could occur on an engine. I just mentioned the most common issues. Thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and we'll see you next time.